But yeah, it's a huge charitable organization, and a lot of people are surprised. You showed us look of surprise on your face because it's not really known. They don't advertise that.
No, that's again, for me, the guys I met that were high ranking, when I spoke to them, it was a lot of depth. I'm a math guy. I'm interested in math. I'm interested in strategy, and they were interested in architecture. But for me, it's a community you're in that helps you move up in life. And but by the way, what do you know about is it the Quattro Coronati Lodge number 2076? What do you know about that? Do you know anything about that?
Not
or no?
a lot. I mean, I think they were a research lodge, if my memory serves me correct. They were a research lodge that did a lot of publication, writings, and things on some of the deeper mysteries of the craft, because there is a lot of depth to the whole system. It's the symbolism when you start unpacking it pertains to every aspect of life.
Do you yourself, like even today, like, you know, for me, one of the things I want to ask you about, you go to Smithsonian, right? Mm-hmm. And you wonder who controls history. Today I'm having lunch with a very respectful Assyrian lady who has done, I'm Assyrian, I'm Armenian, and she came to me because there's a meeting going on they want me to be part of. No problem, I'm honored by it, but I'm talking to her, and she's gone around the country talking to a lot of people that slowly but surely are eliminating all the findings and all the inventions that Assyrians had. So they're losing credit. Other people are taking credit for what's going on, that this is her mission, what she's working on, right? So you wonder, like, some of the people that control history, what did they do with it? So then for me, it goes down to, are there secret societies that have the type of influence and pull that can rewrite history and gaslight us if we want to? And how do you feel about other secret societies? When we hear about Skull and Bones, when we hear about Illuminati, we hear about, what do you think about these guys?
Okay, so Skull and Bones, I mean, I know that's I don't know much about that. A lot of people get Skull and Bones. They think if you're Skull and Bones, you're automatically Freemason, which is not the case. They're really completely separate. I think Skull and Bones wasn't that Yale University graduates pretty much. They may have adopted some quasi-Masonic stuff, because as far as secret societies, you have to bear in mind that during some of the post-Middle Ages, during the time of like various religious suppressions and so on, I mean, to be a known Freemason was essentially a death sentence. You know, Freemasonry was suppressed for centuries. After the decline of the Gothic building period in the late 12 and early 1300s, there was a shift. The lodges back then were called operative because they actually built things. But what happened was you had this major climate shift, late 1200s, early 1300s. What made the Gothic cathedral building era possible, and I don't know if you ever toured some of the big magnificent cathedrals like Chartres or Amiens, Reims, Notre Dame, put it on your list. It's worth doing. So what happened was you had about 300 years of warm climate, abundant agriculture that came after the Dark Ages. And the Dark Ages were a time of deterioration of society. It was very cold. The Dark Ages were essentially launched around in the 500s. And it was some of the coldest weather of the last 2,000 years was, say, between 536. They say 536, the paleoclimatologists say that might have been like the coldest year of the last 2,000 years. Anyways, you had like 300 years of really, bad climate. And then that ameliorated in the 900s. The planet warmed up. That was when, the Scandinavians were colonizing Greenland and farming, where it's now permafrost. And you had this long growing season. You had abundant crops. People were well fed. And you see between 950, say, and 1,050 to 1,100, the population of Europe expanded enormously. People's lifespans expanded. Infant mortality went down. Even the stature of people during that medieval warm period increased by like 4 inches on average. Well, as a result of
stature increased 4 inches.
About that, yeah.
Wow.
Because it took a few generations, but I mean, look at how much the over the last 2 or 3 generations of Japanese have grown. They used to be considered, I don't want to be racist here, but they were their stature, they were short. But now, I don't know what happened with the Japanese, but their average stature has increased considerably in the last few. Rob could probably find a statistic on that. But my point is this: society got wealthy. And because of that wealth, they were able to undertake this tremendous enterprise of cathedral building. And then in the early 1300s, the climate flipped again and it got cold. And it started the Little Ice Age. And between like 1312, 1314, and 1330, right in there, 1340, you had a whole series of very bad years where you had agricultural failures. This led to people being hungry. It led to famine. Famine caused people to be malnourished. Their immune systems got weakened. And then in the 1340s, you had the bubonic plague. And that was the end for the most part, of the cathedral building era.
Rob, can you pull up the link I just sent you? Very interesting what he's saying about the Japanese and the Vietnamese.
The Great Famine of...
No, Rob, can you pull up the link I just sent you? If you just go on Google and you type in, has height of Japanese increased? Just type that. Has height of Japanese increased? And then if you go to the first one right there that comes up, right there, if you can zoom in right there, whatever you have. You just had specifically in the 50s, the average height of Japanese men and women was 1.5 meters and 1.49 meters, respectively 4 centimeters shorter than Vietnamese at the time. However, more than 50 years later, by 2021, height of Japanese men and women is 1.72 and 1.58, respectively, amongst highest in Asia. Interesting.
Yeah. So that's what happened in the Middle Ages.
And even more back then, probably.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was part of that. It was symptomatic of just the general, improvement of society that occurred at the time.
Is this food, nutrition?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's the primary factor.
Okay.
Yeah. So because of this wealth and people having leisure time, and this increase, it was a considerable increase in population in Europe. That provided the environmental context that made the great Gothic cathedral building era possible, which lasted from about 1130 to about 1300. That was the peak right in there. And then it declined rapidly after that. And when the bubonic plague swept over Europe, you might look that up, Rob, to give us the exact years. I think it was around 1340, give or take a decade. That pretty much brought the whole enterprise to an end. 1346 to 1353, yeah.
So it was the most fatal pandemics in human history. As many as 50 million perished. Perhaps 50% of Europe's 14th century population.
Yeah, so there was no more, you didn't have the labor pool. You didn't have people to quarry the stones, to carve the stones, to do the stained glass windows. You didn't have the carpenters to build, because, imagine if, half the population goes down, the other half is struggling to survive. So that was pretty much the end of that, what has been called the operative dimension of Freemasonry. But they had all of this knowledge that was, of geometry, astronomy, engineering, symbology. In order to preserve that knowledge, they became philosophical, or sometimes the term is speculative. And so
is this like a rebranding that they were going through?
Like a rebranding.
Okay.
You can look at it that way. It was like a rebranding.
Got it.
Now you don't have to actually be out there slinging a trowel. You don't have to actually be building formwork or any of that, because we're going to codify all of this information into this system to perpetuate it for whatever point it's going to be valuable in the future.
So at this era that you're talking about, the reputation for Freemasons is now better versus what it used to be before.
Well, yeah. So, then it went underground. After we went into, as we go into the Little Ice Age, there was a period there of where you had this rise of superstition, and like a lot of the witch burning pogroms were directly connected with inclement weather. There would be a cold spell or a hailstorm, and then the priests were blaming that upon the witches. So in order to try to rectify the bad weather of the 14, 15, 1600s and so on, they were burning women at the stake. And they were also killing Freemasons. If you were a Freemason, you would be, perhaps your life would be in danger.
What year is this?
Well, this would be from 1400s right down to the early 1700s. And then what happened was as society became more liberal and more, open to science and all this, right on the heels of the scientific Enlightenment, which you would call, and the Renaissance. In 1717, you had 3 lodges in the United Kingdom, in the British Isles, that sort of, in a sense, went public. They joined forces. They formed what is now still to this day the Grand Lodge of Britain. I think it was 1717. Grand Lodge of Britain. Pretty sure that was the year, and then it's been pretty much, it's been open since then. But the secrecy, what's the year up there?
1717.
Okay, that was the year. So they consolidated these separate lodges that had existed in secret in order to preserve themselves. So then they joined forces 1717 and became the Grand Lodge of Britain, which charters most of the Masonic lodges around the world. And there was also, interestingly, out of the Crusades, you might be, and I'm a little bit rusty on the specifics of this, but there was a whole branch of Freemasonry practiced under Islam, under Sufism.